A mother sat in the rain, holding her hungry daughter in her arms while hundreds of people walked past without helping. But when the world discovered who she really was, everyone wished they had stopped. Sarah never imagined that her life could change so drastically in such a short time. Just a few months earlier, she had been living a simple but happy life with her husband and their 6-year-old daughter, Emma. Their apartment was small, but it was filled with laughter, warmth, and love. Every morning, Sarah would prepare breakfast while her husband got ready for work. Emma would run around the living room with endless energy, making both of them smile. They were not wealthy, but they had enough to pay their bills, keep food on the table, and dream about a better future together. Sarah often believed that as long as her family was united, they could overcome any challenge life placed in their path. Everything changed on a cold afternoon when Sarah received a phone call that shattered her world. Her husband had been involved in a serious workplace accident. At first, she refused to believe it. She rushed to the hospital, praying that there had been some mistake. But when she arrived, the doctors delivered the heartbreaking news she never wanted to hear. Her husband was gone. In a single moment, the man she loved, the father of her child, and the person who had always stood beside her was taken away forever. The days that followed felt like a nightmare. Sarah could barely sleep or eat. Every corner of the apartment reminded her of the life they had shared together. Emma kept asking when her father would come home, and each question felt like another wound in Sarah's heart. She tried to stay strong for her daughter, but the pain was overwhelming. She often cried alone at night after Emma had fallen asleep, afraid to let her daughter see how broken she truly felt. As Sarah struggled with grief, new problems began to appear. Medical expenses, unpaid bills, and unexpected debts started piling up. The small savings she and her husband had carefully built over the years disappeared faster than she could have imagined. Every month became a battle to keep up with expenses. She worked longer hours and took every opportunity she could find, hoping to keep their lives from falling apart. Despite her efforts, the pressure kept growing. The stress followed her everywhere. She worried constantly about rent, groceries, and Emma's future. Some nights she skipped meals so her daughter would have enough to eat. She reassured Emma that everything was fine, even when she was unsure how they would survive the next week. She learned to hide her fear behind a smile because she wanted her daughter to feel safe. Then came another devastating blow. The company where Sarah worked announced staff reductions. With business struggling, several employees were let go, and Sarah was among them. Losing her job felt like losing the last piece of stability she had left. She spent countless days searching for work, filling out applications, attending interviews, and making phone calls. Each rejection made her situation more desperate. Employers either weren't hearing or chose someone else. Soon, the bills became impossible to manage. The landlord gave repeated warnings about overdue rent. Sarah begged for more time, explaining her situation, but there was only so much patience anyone could offer. Eventually, the day arrived that she had feared the most. She packed their remaining belongings into a few bags while Emma quietly watched from the corner of the room. The apartment that had once been their home no longer belonged to them. As Sarah closed the door for the final time, she felt as though she was leaving behind not just a place, but the last memories of the life they had lost. Standing on the sidewalk with nowhere to go, holding her daughter's hand and carrying everything they owned, Sarah realized that the hardest chapter of her life was only beginning. The first few days after losing their home were the hardest Sarah had ever experienced. She and Emma moved from one temporary place to another, spending nights wherever they could find a little shelter. Sometimes it was a bus station, sometimes a public park, and sometimes the corner of a building that offered protection from the wind. Sarah did everything possible to make the situation seem like an adventure for her daughter. She told stories, played simple games, and tried to keep Emma smiling, but deep inside she was terrified. Every morning she woke up with the same question in her mind. How would she find food, safety, and a better future for her child? Sarah refused to give up. Instead of asking strangers for money, she spent her days searching for work. She believed that if someone gave her a chance, she could rebuild their lives. Early every morning, she would straighten her clothes as best she could and walk through busy streets, visiting stores, restaurants, and businesses. She asked managers if they needed help cleaning, organizing, carrying supplies, or doing any kind of work. Most barely looked at her before saying no. Some dismissed her immediately because of her appearance. Others simply pointed toward the door and moved on to the next customer. One afternoon, Sarah stood outside a grocery store holding a handwritten sign. It didn't ask for money. It simply read, "Looking for work, willing to do any honest job." Hundreds of people passed by. Some glanced at the sign and continued walking. Others avoided eye contact completely. A few whispered to one another while looking in her direction. Sarah could hear fragments of their conversations. "She's probably just looking for sympathy. If she really wanted work, she'd have a job already. People always have an excuse." Each comment felt like a heavy weight pressing down on her heart. None of those people knew her story. None of them knew about the husband she had lost, the nights she cried herself to sleep, or the sacrifices she made every day for Emma. Yet they judged her within seconds of seeing her. Emma often sat beside her, quietly drawing pictures on scraps of paper Sarah had found. Sometimes she would look up and ask innocent questions. "Mom, why won't anyone help us?" Sarah never knew how to answer. She didn't want her daughter to lose faith in people, so she would smile gently and say, "Sometimes people are busy, sweetheart. We just have to keep trying." But even Sarah's hope was beginning to fade. The constant rejection was exhausting. Every closed door felt like another reminder that society had already decided who she was without giving her a chance to explain. One rainy evening, Sarah and Emma sat beneath a small shelter near a bus station. The cold wind cut through their thin clothing. People rushed past carrying umbrellas, eager to reach their destinations. A well-dressed businessman noticed them for a moment before shaking his head and walking away. A group of teenagers laughed as they passed by. An older woman stared at Sarah and muttered something about poor life choices before disappearing into the crowd. Sarah lowered her eyes and remained silent. Responding would change nothing. She had learned that many people preferred assumptions over understanding. It was easier for them to believe she was responsible for her situation than to imagine how quickly life could fall apart for anyone. As days turned into weeks, their situation became even more difficult. Food was scarce. Sarah often spent hours searching for affordable meals or leftovers that kind restaurant workers occasionally offered. Whenever she managed to get something to eat, she always made sure Emma ate first. If there wasn't enough food for both of them, Sarah would pretend she wasn't hungry. "I already ate earlier," she would say with a smile. Emma usually believed her, but sometimes she noticed the tired look in her mother's eyes. One evening, Emma broke a piece of bread in half and handed part of it back. "You should eat too, Mom." Sarah felt tears gathering in her eyes. Even with so little, her daughter still wanted to share. She hugged Emma tightly and promised that things would get better soon, though she wasn't certain how. What hurt Sarah most wasn't the hunger, the cold, or the uncertainty. It was the feeling of becoming invisible. Every day she stood among thousands of people, yet very few truly saw her. To most strangers, she was just another struggling woman on the street. They never stopped to ask what had happened. They never wondered what pain she carried behind her tired smile. They saw her circumstances and assumed they knew her entire story, never realizing that behind her quiet determination was a mother fighting with every ounce of strength. She had to protect the one person who meant more to her than anything else in the world, her beloved daughter Emma, whose future remained the only reason she continued moving forward despite the growing darkness surrounding them every single day and night, without relief or certainty about what tomorrow might bring to their fragile lives, an uncertain journey ahead of them, both in a world that seemed to have forgotten they existed altogether, and left them standing alone against impossible odds, with no clear path toward hope or rescue in sight. By the time Sarah and Emma had spent several weeks struggling on the streets, exhaustion had become part of their daily lives. Every morning began with uncertainty, and every night ended with unanswered questions. Sarah continued searching for work wherever she could, refusing to surrender to despair. Despite her determination, the constant rejection was slowly wearing her down. She tried her best to hide her worries from Emma, but the strain showed in her tired eyes and the way her shoulders slumped whenever another opportunity slipped away. One chilly afternoon, Sarah and Emma sat on a bench outside a small neighborhood cafe. Emma quietly leaned against her mother while watching people come and go through the glass doors. Inside, customers laughed with friends, enjoyed warm meals, and carried on with their busy lives. The smell of fresh coffee and baked bread drifted through the air, making Emma's stomach growl softly. Sarah noticed and gently brushed her daughter's hair back. "Just a little longer, sweetheart," she whispered. "We'll figure something out." Emma nodded, trying to be brave. Inside the cafe, a young employee named Daniel was wiping tables near the window. He had noticed Sarah and Emma several times before. Every day they seemed to appear somewhere nearby, sitting quietly and never causing trouble. Unlike others who occasionally asked customers for money, Sarah never approached anyone. She simply sat with her daughter, speaking softly and keeping to herself. Daniel couldn't help but watch them from time to time. Something about them felt different. As he carried a tray toward the counter, he glanced outside again and noticed Sarah opening a small paper bag. Inside was a single sandwich. She carefully divided it into 2 pieces. Then she handed the larger portion to Emma. "What about you, Mom?" Emma asked. Sarah smiled. "I ate earlier, I'm not hungry." Daniel could tell immediately that she was lying. He watched as Emma began eating while Sarah simply sat there, pretending everything was fine. Her eyes remained fixed on her daughter, and despite her own hunger, she seemed relieved just to see Emma eating. The sight stayed with Daniel. For the rest of his shift, he couldn't stop thinking about them. He remembered difficult periods in his own life when strangers had shown him kindness. Without those people, he wasn't sure where he would be today. When his break arrived, Daniel packed 2 warm meals and stepped outside. Sarah looked surprised when he approached. "Excuse me," he said gently. "I thought you and your daughter might like something to eat." Sarah immediately shook her head. "No, thank you, we don't have money." Daniel smiled. "I'm not asking for any." For a moment, Sarah hesitated. She wasn't used to accepting help. Pride and dignity had carried her through many difficult situations, but one look at Emma was enough. "Thank you," she said quietly. Daniel handed them the meals. Emma's face lit up instantly. "This smells amazing." The simple reaction made Daniel smile. As they ate, he sat nearby and introduced himself. At first, Sarah seemed cautious. She had learned to be careful around strangers, but Daniel wasn't asking intrusive questions or making assumptions. He simply talked to her like a normal person. That alone felt unusual. Most people either ignored her or judged her. Daniel listened. Over the next few days, he continued checking on them whenever he could. Sometimes he brought leftover food from the cafe. Other times he simply stopped to ask how they were doing. Gradually, Sarah became more comfortable talking to him. She never complained about her circumstances. She never spoke bitterly about the people who ignored her. Even when discussing her struggles, she focused mostly on Emma. "My daughter deserves better than this," she once admitted. "You're doing everything you can," Daniel replied. Sarah looked down. "Sometimes it doesn't feel like enough." Daniel could see how much she carried on her shoulders. Yet despite everything, she remained remarkably kind. One afternoon, as rain fell steadily outside, Daniel noticed something unusual. Sarah was sitting beneath a covered shelter with an old notebook resting on her lap. She wasn't simply writing random notes. She was completely absorbed in it. Page after page filled with careful handwriting. Hours passed and she continued writing. The next day she did the same thing. Then the day after that. Daniel grew curious. Whenever she wasn't searching for work or caring for Emma, she seemed focused on that notebook. One evening he finally asked, "You write a lot." Sarah quickly closed the notebook. A faint smile appeared on her face. "Just thoughts. Thoughts. Memories, ideas, things I don't want to forget." Daniel nodded, though he sensed there was more to it. The notebook clearly meant something important. Every time she held it, her expression changed. For a brief moment, the sadness seemed to disappear, replaced by determination and purpose. Daniel respected her privacy and didn't press further. Still, questions remained in his mind. Who was Sarah before all of this happened? Why did she seem different from everyone else he had met? And why did she protect that notebook as if it contained something priceless? The more time he spent with her, the more he realized that the woman sitting outside the cafe was not defined by her circumstances. Beneath the worn clothes and visible exhaustion was someone intelligent, compassionate, and remarkably resilient. While others saw only a homeless mother struggling to survive, Daniel began seeing a person with a story that had yet to be fully told. He didn't know what secrets she carried or what chapters of her life remained hidden, but he felt certain that there was far more to Sarah than anyone realized, and that the answers resting inside that old notebook would eventually reveal a truth capable of changing everything people thought they knew about the quiet woman and her daughter who sat unnoticed among the crowds each day, while carrying a history no one had bothered to discover. As the days passed, Daniel found himself thinking more and more about Sarah and Emma. What had started as a simple act of kindness had grown into genuine concern. He admired Sarah's strength and determination, but he was also troubled by the mystery surrounding her. There was something unusual about the way she carried herself. Even in the middle of hardship, she spoke with confidence and grace. Her words were thoughtful, her manners were refined, and the notebook she guarded so carefully seemed to hold a significance far greater than simple memories. One afternoon, dark clouds gathered over the city. The air felt heavy, and people hurried through the streets to avoid the approaching storm. Sarah and Emma were sitting near the bus station when Emma suddenly looked pale. "Mom," she whispered, placing a hand on her stomach, "I don't feel good." Sarah immediately became concerned. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" "I'm tired." Sarah touched her forehead and noticed she felt unusually warm. Worry filled her heart. Emma had seemed weaker over the past few days, but Sarah had hoped it was only exhaustion. "Let's sit down for a minute," Sarah said gently. Emma nodded, but before she could take another step, her legs gave way beneath her. "Emma." Sarah dropped to her knees as her daughter collapsed onto the pavement. The sound of her voice drew attention from nearby pedestrians. People stopped and stared. Some pulled out their phones. Others gathered around to see what was happening. Sarah cradled Emma in her arms. "Please wake up, Emma, talk to me." Fear consumed her. "Somebody help, please." A crowd formed within seconds. Yet nobody moved. People exchanged worried glances, whispered among themselves, and watched from a distance. Sarah's voice trembled as tears streamed down her face. "My daughter needs help." At that moment, Daniel happened to be leaving the cafe after finishing his shift. He heard the commotion and immediately ran toward the crowd. The moment he saw Emma lying unconscious in Sarah's arms, he understood the seriousness of the situation. "Call an ambulance," someone shouted. Daniel didn't wait for anyone else. He pulled out his phone and made the call himself. Minutes felt like hours. Sarah remained beside Emma, desperately holding her hand. "Please be okay," she whispered repeatedly. When the ambulance finally arrived, paramedics quickly examined Emma and transported her to the hospital. Sarah climbed inside without hesitation. Daniel followed behind in his own car. At the hospital, doctors rushed Emma into treatment while Sarah waited anxiously outside. Every second felt unbearable. She paced the hallway, wringing her hands together and fighting back tears. Daniel stayed nearby. "You're not alone," he told her. Sarah nodded quietly. For the first time since they had met, she looked completely defeated. Hours passed before a doctor finally emerged. "She'll recover," he said. The words brought immediate relief. Sarah covered her face as tears of gratitude flowed freely. "Thank you," she whispered. The doctor explained that Emma was suffering from severe exhaustion, dehydration, and nutritional deficiencies. Fortunately, she had received treatment in time. As Sarah sat in the waiting area recovering from the emotional shock, she accidentally dropped her old notebook onto the floor. The impact caused dozens of pages to scatter in every direction. Daniel immediately bent down to help gather them. "Let me help." Sarah reached for the pages as well. But as Daniel collected them, something caught his attention. The pages weren't filled with ordinary notes. They weren't journals. They weren't random memories. Each page contained carefully crafted chapters. Dialogue, descriptions, characters, entire scenes. The writing was extraordinary. Daniel stared at one page longer than he intended. The words pulled him in immediately. The emotions felt real. The storytelling was powerful. "You wrote this?" he asked. Sarah hesitated. "Yes." Daniel flipped through another page. Then another. The quality was undeniable. "This is incredible." Sarah gently took the pages from his hands. "It's nothing." "No," Daniel replied. "It's definitely something." For a moment, Sarah remained silent. Then she looked away. The expression on her face suggested years of hidden memories. Daniel noticed a name written on one of the pages. His eyes widened. The title sounded familiar. Very familiar. Suddenly, a realization began forming in his mind. It couldn't be possible. Yet the more he thought about it, the more everything started connecting together. Years earlier, a novel had become a worldwide sensation. The book had touched millions of readers with its emotional story and unforgettable message. It had appeared on bestseller lists for months. Book clubs discussed it. Schools recommended it. Critics praised it. Yet one mystery had always surrounded the novel. Nobody knew much about the author. The writer had remained almost completely anonymous. Few interviews. No public appearances. Very little personal information. Daniel remembered reading that story years ago. And now the title sitting before him matched perfectly. He looked at Sarah, then at the manuscript, then back at Sarah. His heart raced. "Wait," he said slowly. Sarah immediately knew what he was thinking. "Daniel, was that your book?" She closed her eyes briefly. The silence answered the question before she spoke. "Yes." Daniel sat frozen. For several seconds he couldn't find words. "You wrote it?" Sarah nodded. "The entire thing." The revelation seemed impossible. The woman countless people ignored every day. The woman sleeping on the streets. The woman struggling to feed her daughter. She was the anonymous author behind one of the most beloved books of the past decade. Daniel stared at her in disbelief. But if the book was so successful... Sarah gave a faint smile. "I know what you're going to ask. Then where did all the money go?" For a long moment she said nothing. Then she finally answered. "I gave it away." Daniel blinked. What? The royalties, the earnings, almost everything. He thought he had misunderstood. You donated it. Sarah nodded. Children's hospitals, educational programs, emergency assistance funds, shelters, families in crisis. Daniel was speechless. Years of earnings. Years of success. Gone. Not because she had wasted it. Not because she had lived extravagantly. But because she had chosen to help strangers. Why would you do that? He asked quietly. Sarah looked toward the hospital room where Emma was resting. Because I knew what it felt like to struggle. Daniel listened carefully. Years earlier, Sarah had grown up in poverty. She remembered nights when her own family barely had enough food. She remembered the kindness of strangers who had helped them survive difficult times. When success finally came into her life, she made a promise to herself. If she ever had the ability to help others, she would. And she kept that promise. For years, she quietly funded charities without seeking recognition. She paid medical bills for children she would never meet. Supported families she never expected to thank her. Helped people rebuild their lives after tragedy. She never announced it publicly because she believed kindness should not be performed for applause. The irony was heartbreaking. The same woman who had spent years helping others now found herself abandoned by society during her darkest moment. The same people who walked past her on the street had no idea they were ignoring someone whose generosity had changed countless lives. As Daniel sat there absorbing the truth, he realized he was witnessing something extraordinary. Behind the appearance of hardship was a woman whose compassion had touched more people than she could ever count. A woman who had sacrificed her own fortune to ease the suffering of strangers. And a woman whose hidden story was far more remarkable than anyone could have imagined when they passed her on the sidewalk, without stopping to learn her name or understand the incredible legacy of kindness she had quietly built throughout her life, while expecting nothing in return from a world that had never truly known who she was. The discovery of Sarah's secret stayed in Daniel's mind long after he left the hospital that evening. He could not stop thinking about the incredible contrast between what people saw and who she truly was. To the world, Sarah appeared to be just another struggling mother trying to survive. But behind that painful reality was a woman whose kindness had touched countless lives. The more Daniel reflected on it, the more he felt that her story deserved to be known. At first, he hesitated. Sarah had spent years avoiding attention. She had never sought recognition for her generosity, and he respected that. But he also knew that the world needed to hear her story, not to celebrate her fame, but to remind people how quickly they judged others without understanding their circumstances. After careful thought, Daniel shared her story online. He did not reveal private details or ask for donations. He simply wrote about the mother he had met, the sacrifices she had made, and the shocking truth hidden behind her difficult situation. Within hours, the post began spreading. Hundreds of people shared it. Then thousands. Soon, millions of people across the country were reading about Sarah. The reactions were immediate. Many readers were shocked. Others felt ashamed. People could hardly believe that the woman who had once helped so many others had been left alone during her greatest time of need. News organizations picked up the story. Writers discussed it. Social media users shared their thoughts. Everywhere, people asked the same question. How could this happen? As the story continued spreading, something remarkable began to occur. People started coming forward. One by one, individuals shared personal experiences that connected back to Sarah. A father revealed that years earlier, an anonymous donation had paid for his son's heart surgery when he could not afford the medical expenses. A young woman explained that she had been able to attend college because of a scholarship funded by an unknown benefactor. A family described how financial assistance during a devastating house fire had helped them rebuild their lives. Again and again, the stories appeared. Different cities, different backgrounds, different circumstances. Yet they all pointed to the same person, Sarah. Many of those people had never met her. Some had never even heard her name before. Yet her kindness had quietly changed their lives forever. The public response grew larger each day. Letters arrived at the hospital. Messages poured in from around the world. People who had once benefited from her generosity wanted an opportunity to thank her. Meanwhile, Sarah remained focused on Emma's recovery. She never expected attention. She never asked for sympathy. When hospital staff informed her about the growing public reaction, she seemed genuinely surprised. "I never wanted any of this," she admitted. "You deserve to know how much your kindness meant," one nurse told her. A few days later, Emma was finally healthy enough to leave the hospital. As Sarah gathered their belongings, she looked forward to returning to reality, though she still had no idea what awaited them outside. Holding Emma's hand, she walked toward the main entrance. The automatic doors slowly opened. What she saw made her stop instantly. Hundreds of people stood outside. The crowd stretched across the sidewalk. Some held flowers. Others carried handwritten signs. Many simply stood quietly, waiting. For a moment, Sarah thought there must be some mistake. Then she noticed the faces. Tears filled her eyes. These people were there for her. The crowd erupted into applause. Not the applause given to celebrities. Not the applause given to performers. But the sincere gratitude of people whose lives had been touched by kindness. An elderly man stepped forward first. His hands trembled slightly as he approached. "You don't know me," he said. Sarah listened quietly. 10 years ago, my granddaughter needed emergency treatment. We had no money left. An anonymous donation covered everything." His voice broke. She survived because of that help. Tears rolled down his face. "Thank you." Before Sarah could respond, another woman approached. Then another. And another. Each carried a story. Each carried gratitude. A mother explained how assistance during a difficult divorce had helped her protect her children. A young teacher described receiving educational support that allowed her to pursue her dreams. A businessman shared how financial aid during a personal crisis prevented him from losing everything. The stories continued for hours. Some people laughed through tears. Others openly cried. Many hugged Sarah tightly. For perhaps the first time in her life, she fully understood the reach of her compassion. The kindness she had offered over the years had spread much farther than she ever imagined. Emma looked around in amazement. "Mom," she whispered, "all these people came for you." Sarah smiled through her tears. "No, sweetheart." She gently squeezed her daughter's hand. "They came because kindness always finds its way back." The following weeks brought changes Sarah never expected. Several organizations offered assistance. Community members helped secure safe housing for her and Emma. Publishers contacted her after learning about her unfinished manuscript. They were eager to support her new work. Employment opportunities appeared. Financial stability slowly returned. Most importantly, Sarah and Emma finally had a place they could call home again. Yet despite everything, Sarah remained exactly the same. She never became arrogant. She never treated herself as someone special. She continued helping others whenever she could. Months later, her new book was officially released. The launch event attracted enormous attention. Readers from across the country attended. Many came not only because of her writing, but because of the extraordinary story behind it. During a question and answer session, a reporter stood up and asked the question everyone wanted answered. After everything you've experienced, the loss, the struggle, the rejection, and now all of this support, what lesson have you learned? The room became silent. Hundreds of people waited for her response. Sarah looked toward Emma, who sat smiling proudly in the front row. Then she turned back to the audience. For a moment, she carefully considered her words. Finally, she spoke. The people who need kindness the most often hide their pain the best. The room remained completely still. Her words touched something deep within everyone present. She continued. When I was struggling, many people saw my situation and assumed they knew my story. They saw a homeless mother and created their own conclusions. Very few stopped to ask what happened. Very few chose compassion before judgment. Many audience members lowered their eyes. Sarah smiled gently. But I don't blame them. Life moves fast. We all make assumptions sometimes. The important thing is learning to see people as human beings, not circumstances. A wave of applause filled the room. Some people stood. Others wiped tears from their faces. Because deep down, everyone understood the truth in her words. No one knows the battles another person is fighting. The stranger walking past you may be carrying unbearable grief. The tired worker may be struggling to support a family. The quiet woman sitting alone may have a story more extraordinary than anyone could imagine. As the event ended, Sarah signed books and greeted readers for hours. Before leaving, she looked around the crowded room one final time. Years earlier, she had chosen kindness without expecting rewards. She had helped others simply because it was the right thing to do. And although life had tested her in unimaginable ways, compassion had eventually found its way back to her. Not because she demanded it, not because she earned special treatment, but because genuine kindness has a way of creating ripples that travel far beyond what we can see. Sarah and Emma walked out together that evening, stronger than ever before. The painful chapter that once seemed endless had finally come to an end. Ahead of them was a future filled with hope, opportunity, and the knowledge that even in humanity's darkest moments, there are still people willing to care. Moral of the story: never judge someone by their appearance, circumstances, or current struggles. Every person carries a story that you cannot see. A small act of kindness may seem insignificant to you, but it can mean everything to someone fighting a silent battle. Compassion costs nothing, yet it has the power to change lives, heal hearts, and remind us of our shared humanity. Disclaimer: this story is created for educational and entertainment purposes. The characters, events, and situations portrayed in this video are fictional and inspired by real-life human emotions and experiences. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or deceased, is purely coincidental. The purpose of this story is to share a meaningful message about kindness, empathy, and the importance of helping others without judgment.